Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our third Small Great Conversations. My name is Sabine Perways, and I have the honor of serving as the executive producer for TEDxJacksonville. And this is our third conversation. It goes along with our mission to open minds with inspiring ideas. We decided to do these Small Great Conversations in lieu of our annual October conference because we felt like this conversation needed to be had specifically around racism and social justice. It's been a particularly heavy week, as you all know. It was the 60th anniversary for Axe Handle Saturday here in Jacksonville. It was the 57th anniversary for MLK's I Have a Dream speech. And of course, it was also the week where we heard about Jacob Blake and him being in the hospital and being shot 7 times. And so more and more, it gives us the urgency to have this conversation with our previous speakers around racism. It doesn't matter what year they gave their talk and spoke on our stage. As we've heard in the past 2 conversations, and I'm sure as we'll hear today, the conversations are still very relevant and very important, so we all can do our part in moving our communities forward. So today's conversation is with our 2019 speaker, Phillip Singleton, and it is moderated by our communications director, David Johnson. David has been a lifelong resident of Jacksonville and a proud Stanton grad. He works as in the public affairs department at Jack's Chamber, and of course also volunteers with us. In addition, when he has free time, he's also a big brother with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, served on the board of directors with the Jacksonville Children's Chorus, and he's currently a 2020 class of the Stein Fellowship, which is the Blueprint for Leadership with Hands-On Jacksonville. And
it's truly my honor to introduce Phillip Singleton today. Phillip has been working to serve underserved communities for years now. He has helped those communities as well as nonprofits, institutions of higher education, and others just come and grab that seat at the political table that they need. He's a best-selling author, political strategist, and influencer known as the Hip Hop Lobbyist. At the age of 24, he became the youngest African-American lobbyist in Florida's history. He now has his own full-service government affairs and multicultural outreach, which is Singleton Consulting. And among his successful projects and work in politics and public policy, he's helped pass legislation regarding the expansion of MLS, Major League Soccer in Florida. He's secured resources and funding for top 50 and historically Black colleges and universities. He's helped with campaign and election reform in the state of Florida, and he's secured millions in state resources for various projects, including at-risk youth programs, economic development. The list really goes on. And I could go on and on with his bio. It seems long, but I'm cutting it in half, really. I'll stop there and welcome Phillip with us. Thank you for joining us, Phillip.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Sabine, and everyone with the leadership of TEDx Jacksonville for inviting me to have a conversation about racism. And really, even better than that, inviting me on the stage the first time. It was my first time ever on stage. And it was really a great experience. So just thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and my idea, and even get to the point where we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, it was an incredible talk, as everyone saw from Florida Theater. So many policy stuff covered there, and that was only 2019. So it's been less than a year, but at the same time, how much has happened in our world in less than a year? We've seen the world change in such a short time, and us adjust and have important conversations like these. With all that's happened, here in our community and across the nation since you spoke, where have you anchored your time and focus since your talk?
Well, after my talk, I really had to get back into the day-to-day grind of the legislative process. And that really started a month later, committee weeks, going into legislative session, and really trying to represent, pre-COVID, of course, represent my clients' best interests, and then try to get them resources. We were literally, I want to say February, going into the budget process. I want to say all my clients had resources in the budget, from at-risk youth to a charter school I'm working with, and a little bit of everything. So we were sprinkled in really well throughout the budget. But then right before COVID, end of February, beginning of March, a member came to me, one of the budget chairmen. He's like, listen, Phil, I can't have your clients basically think that they're going to get this money. We don't know what COVID's going to do. We don't know what the impact's going to be. So I'm going to end up stripping the projects from the budget because we don't know what's going to end up happening. Excuse me, I got a text that I had to ignore there. I apologize. But from there, it basically got to a point where I had to really try to reassess where my clients were, where I was, what's happening in the world. And then when COVID really took off, really started to see what was impacted the most, like from schools to healthcare to technology. And I want to say the underbelly of issues that were really there, outside of racism, outside of police brutality, outside of even the talk, everything kind of rose up within 6 months after the talk. And it's kind of like I sat back from a perspective of what's the next steps? Like, what do we really do? Because at first, I didn't think it would be this serious. It's a flu, but then, or it's a virus for the most part. But then by January, February, even by mid-May, it was like, wait, we don't know what the implication this is going to be. So really, I've been focused on how we get past the next step to this. And even though there's been a lot of police brutality, innocent people that have been killed by the police or even killed in general or lost their life, it's really changed my perspective on the talk and also where we are as a society on how we actually push the needle forward and get results. Really.
And yeah, and you touched on this a little bit, but definitely want to go deeper into this topic. The murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, among many others, as well as the recent shooting, as Sabine mentioned, of James Blake that left him paralyzed. That has, created some of these conversations, which is important to see, discussions on racism, Black Lives Matter, and anti-racism. How have these events amplified the message that you delivered in your talk?
I think it amplified the message some. Me personally, and I know we discussed this offline, and I'll be transparent with everyone who happens to be watching. I have not to this day watched the George Floyd video. I mean, Breonna Taylor, I believe that the body cam footage may have been out or whatever there. They still haven't arrested him, but the police who killed her. But to me, something happened, I want to say 8 months to a year ago, like right before the talk, to be honest. And I got to a point where I couldn't be on social media and watch a life or a soul leave a body. Because to me, when of course, I'm a Black man living in America, and all I could think about is you get on social media, get on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, you see somebody killed, a Black man get killed, and it's kind of like, okay, cool, 2 months later happens again, a month later happens again, a week later happens again, and we kind of get numb to it. And it puts me in a perspective of, okay, cool, was this what it was like on the plantation when a slave said something to the master or overseer and they didn't like it, and they literally had to watch them get lynched in front of their wives, their mothers, whoever it may be. And it really puts it, see, in my mind, it says, I'm not okay watching Black people die and it be normal, especially when I realized that Facebook and Instagram have organizations or third-party companies they hire that help curate what actually we see on our timeline. So it kind of makes me think to myself, is this not a propaganda piece, but is this something where we want to normalize Black killings? We want to make it something that's like trivial, like, oh yeah, it happened, it's okay, we can keep moving. Publix has BOGO today, so we got to go get ourselves or whatever. It really dumbs it down to a point of, makes me think, and I hate to just go back to slavery, but thinking about it, it's like, this is the same psychological thing that has happened. The thing is that it's happened on social media, but history will tell us that even during the civil rights movement, the main reason things change is because things ended up being on TV. It went from a headline of a Negro was lynched in Mississippi to you see him being hosed down. And that narrative and that ocular proof really is what helped spark the conversation to drive civil rights change. But with those, I really feel, I could be alone here, I'm just not at a point where I want to normalize watching somebody lose their life. And to me, that's not normal. And I'm not going to make it normal for me, at least.
Yeah, it's terrible to see, and you're right. There's a desensitization that we fear is why we got into that 24/7 news cycle of see it and move on. And we feel like we're at, a moment here where we hope change happens. But I think you presented both sides of it well, even, the side you favor.
Right.
In terms
And
of,
if I could, not to cut you off, even with Jacob Blake, I think that the fact that he didn't die, it really puts us in a whole nother conversation, because this man's paralyzed, and at this point, And I hate to kick the can down the road, think 6 months down the line, a year down the line, but when the citizens the taxpayers in that city are paying for this man's health care, his family, like all the rest of the stuff, and they start seeing it, it's like, you know what, maybe we should have reacted different. And then the other thing that kind of threw me off last week before the Jacob Blake shooting was the police killed an innocent dog. I can't remember what city or what state, but the police were, I guess, conducting a warrant. There was somebody's innocent dog in the yard, and they were barking or trying to attack the police, and the police killed the dog. And it's kind of like, okay, let's really put that all in perspective, because dog life matters. You know, all lives, black lives, whatever you want to really think. It's kind of like, when are we going to really look at the fact that the police cannot or should not just be able to kill anybody or anything whenever they want to? That needs to be a deeper conversation that nobody really, I feel is ready to have right now.
Yeah, that message is only starting to be shared, that it doesn't matter what your past history is that we spend so much time talking about. You don't have the right to just execute somebody,
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly.
What would you say, and this is, hard to imagine in the important conversations we have, but we know this is out there a lot. What would you say to those who don't believe racism even requires a conversation? That you referred to the 1968 progress that was made, which for too many decades, I think we looked back on, but people perceive that we moved on as a country. Then we elected President Obama. People had, certain reactions to that. But here we are today.
Yeah, I think it's, let me just make sure I answer the question. It was, reset the question for me. I just want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. We're aware of people who believe that, we don't have to have racism as a conversation now, that they believe we've moved on as a country. What would you say, just based on your lived experience?
I think it's hypocrisy. If we really want to put it in perspective, and there are a couple of things that we could think of and relate to. I mean, Dr. King was chastised. He was a socialist. He was everything until the point a bullet went through him and he died. And then 10, 20 years after the fact is, he did a great thing. Look at what he did. And I think that in some people's perspective, when President Obama was elected, it's like, oh, racism ended, but no, it didn't. I mean, the Tea Party came up. They were hanging monkeys. The caricatures were there, and I think the birther movement, whatever you really want to angle it as, it was all there. But I think the deeper part of it is, we have people today. I even say my wife's great grandmother. She's 92 years old. Grandma Mary. She had to be born at least in the 30s. So from the 30s through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I'm not sure. I haven't talked to her prospectively, but I'm quite sure she was disrespected or called out her name or whatever, right? Yeah. During that time frame. It's kind of really put in perspective. Like, you think 30 years ago, when black people were still being lynched, when they were still having to cross the sidewalk to, not 30, that would be, that was 2020, I forget. So that would be, let's say 40 years ago. So even 40, 50 years ago, it really gets into perspective where our grandparents were living that. Our grandparents were the ones getting hosed down and called the N-word and beat and chased down with dogs. So it's kind of like, you mean to tell me that racism is dead and my grandmother or great grandmother is still alive? It's like, if they've seen it and they witnessed it, we can't think that one generation changed it. Just like when Obama was elected, it didn't end racism. It just kind of shed a different light on it. Because just because you're not openly saying overtly racist things, I think that there's still that subconscious thing that people do, or the way that the system is set up, that kind of continues to perpetuate the racism that we have. And another thing, I think that even social media has shown it, with people. Thank you, Steve Jobs. Thank you, Apple and Samsung, whoever. It's the fact of people actually being able to record the interactions, not just with the police, but when you're barbecuing, when you're walking down the street. I want to say the gentleman in California who painted Black Lives Matter in front of his home, and then he was approached by, I want to say, a designer, and basically said, hey, you don't live here. And she put her finger on her mouth or whatever, kind of basically chastising the guy. It's like, those racist tendencies are still there. And what ends up happening is it's an apology after you realize you're caught being racist, or you're caught doing something in 2020. Now, I'll be real. I think that some things we're just politically more sensitive than we were 10, 15 years ago. Going into 2000, Y2K, we weren't as politically sensitive as we are in 2020. But a mix of all of that and the ability with technology to expose people has really got to a point of saying, no, racism is here. We just need to expose it. But the biggest part of it is, you're not going to end racism really until you get in people's households. And we're not going to do that as a country. So it's really one of those things that we really have to weigh out to see how long we really want to make race an issue in America and when we can really grow past it.
Yeah, it's definitely a constant work, and that bridges actually directly into the next question. What do you believe can bridge race relations today?
I think it's just people being realistic about what's happening. I mean, there was an argument I had, not an argument, I'll say a Facebook altercation with elected officials. And, well, one current elected, one former elected. I'll put it that way. And it was more about the George Floyd killing. And even though I didn't see the video, what surprised me was the fact that you can justify anybody dying, right? Even with Jacob Blake, oh, he was going for a knife, he attacked the police. I get it, but guess what? The same guy who decided to drive to Michigan or Wisconsin to protect people and kill two people, he had a gun. He literally killed two people almost in front of the police. But Tamir Rice was caught, and it's like, okay, we justify it because, okay, he's a 6-year-old with a toy gun. Why did he have a toy gun? Well, shit. Sorry for cussing. Why did this other guy have a AR-15, and why was he going to protect businesses that he didn't even own? You're not even a taxpayer in this city or the state. What makes you think that you can go control or take control of a situation and force that in? And I think that the bigger thing that we have to do is really sit back and say, okay, this is not okay. And then the other part of it is really highlighting the fact of, one, things happen in different states. Something that happens in California and Mississippi and Michigan, different states have different laws, but there needs to be a universal code that says, okay, this is what the police can do, this is what they can't do, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and that being the universal piece so that we're not having this conversation about, okay, a white guy jumped out of his car, attacked the police didn't shoot him, but Philando Castile is coming outside of a gas station, he just choked out and shot because they suspect he has a gun on him. That's the problem. It needs to be a universal thing across the board. And politically, I'll just say it now, it's not just, get Mitch McConnell to pass the Justice and Policing Act, because there's going to have to be some time where the reforms that we put in policy-wise that happen with police, they're going to have to take time to be implemented. But I think we need to have a better strategic approach on how that happens, but realize that we've got to shut this off now, because Jacob Blake and the money that the city will be paying his family should be the prime example on why we need to change this across the country, and how much it's really costing people from police randomly shooting folks. Sorry for going on a tangent there. But.
No, that was an important point you made in the talk too, that there's a cost, that bridges political differences, that there's a cost to these killings, and the loss of a life is beyond calculation, but the taxpayers can see like their money is not going to infrastructure because of what you just said. But in terms of your work, Phillip, what is next for you and your work that will lead to a more just society?
I think that one thing, I just got off a little bit of the campaign trail, helping Congressman Lawson with the re-election. I think
congratulations again, Phillip. Yeah, about that. I meant to say that earlier. Yeah, you worked in 2018 and 20. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
I appreciate that. I think I'm at a stage where personally, I've been contacting a lot of the newly elected officials, connecting with them, not only helping them learn the process, but really setting them up to learn the process. I think that the one thing I have to realize as a change agent is that I really get 8 years in any aspect to work with a politician before they're termed out to really make them effective. And not to say that that's a job as a lobbyist to make them effective. What I mean is that to make them understand the policy, because the first 2 years they come in, they think they can change the world. It's not till year 6 that they realize how the game works. And then by year 8, they're termed out. So it's more a fact of, I want to help newly elected officials understand the chess games or the rules before they even step foot in the Capitol. And I think that part will really help the people overall, and not just race relations, but like I said, with COVID, it's exposed the underbelly of things. So it's really got to a point where there are other issues that need to be addressed and fixed, but it's a really fact of having people elected who understand what those issues are and are steadfast on making that change happen real quick, rather than 10, 15 years down the line and having the same problem. Not sure if I answered the question specifically, but I hope I did.
That was great. And I mean, some of the things going on just in current events and with public policy now, where I just feel so fortunate to be having this conversation with you now in terms of your expertise, Phillip. Like right now, I'm just curious, like how you feel about the NBA, MLB. We see other sports leagues, you know, they've gotten involved before. Muhammad Ali obviously was a phenomenal speaker for, you know, people seeking justice in his time in an individual sport like boxing. But now we're seeing the leagues get involved and, you know, athletes and other public figures speaking out about social justice. How do you feel about that? We can kind of see the interaction of protest and policy there in some of those actions.
You can, first and foremost, I'm a diehard Clippers fan. I'm happy the NBA came back. Clippers in 5. I'm posting it all day. I think we're going to win regardless. But a part of me, at first, I was kind of happy that Milwaukee led the charge to start the NBA boycott, the protesting. But then I sat back because, you know, you gotta see things out for what they really are. And within 48 hours, you know, it was, you know, hey, rumors came out, we're canceling, we're boycotting. LeBron put a post up, and then they're back playing, I think, today or tomorrow. And I think that may have been quietly the shortest boycott in American history or civil rights history, because there's nothing that really pushed the needle there forward. And I'll say it this way. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. They were like, you know, and it was via Facebook, that the NBA protests helped because supervisors will be using stadiums for election sites. Technically, it didn't, right? Because that's already in discretion in the statute for supervisors to use these locations for early voting sites or voting sites in general. So it's kind of like all they did was highlight the fact that it's available, and the owners probably just said, hey, we'll make you use a Miami Arena or wherever, Amway Center in Orlando, whatever, to vote. You know, we can do that. We can expand it across the country. So that really didn't move the needle there for me. I think that the issue I have, and I support NBA players and all the professional athletes who are making a stand, the issue is it's the same rhetoric. Now, if anybody pays attention, after Colin Kaepernick 4 years ago took the knee, whatever happened with his career, after the investigations, the NFL just said, hey, we're going to donate money to urban youth, at-risk programs. We're going to fight this social justice change. Guess what? Breonna Taylor got killed after that. George Floyd got killed after that. Jacob Blake got shot after that. So what changed, right? And then with the NBA coming on to say, okay, cool, we're going to give money for social justice change. We're going to expand voting. Nothing happens. And what I see happen is Kendrick Perkins, who I used to respect as a player, but really since he's been commentating, I've lost a lot of respect. A little because he hates on my Clippers, but besides that, it's the fact of like, you end up seeing like the same rhetoric. And what Kendrick said the other day is we need to talk to our mayors, call these owners, to call the governor and have them put the legislation forward. I'm sitting here like, bruh, all these years, why hasn't any NBA player, why hasn't any professional athlete or spokesperson written any legislation as a sponsor, or at least drafted something that could be pushed forward? The other part of it is we keep talking about going to vote. Try not to cuss. What happens after we vote? Because that's the part where people don't really like. LeBron, hey, salute, you got to have a charter school. You're pushing this voter initiative. All the athletes from Kyrie Irving, Kawhi, whoever, MLB, whatever, you know, they're saying great things. But for real, after November 3rd, what happens? Because we can't just say we're going to elect Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump and Pence again. It's the fact of, okay, what policy do we really want to come in here? You know, if Trump wins again, what do we need out of this White House? Because realistically, he's going to be there another 4 years if it happens that way, right? I don't have any predictions, right? I'm not choosing either side for this conversation. But it's the fact of, okay, what happens the day after the election? What can we get out of Trump's White House? Okay, Biden wins. What can we get out of Biden's White House? Until we have that strategy in that conversation, we just talking about vote. Oh, we need to protest, we need to boycott. Guess what? You boycotted for 48 hours, and now you're back getting a check. And I get it. What it really comes down to, when people don't really want to think about it, college football, NFL, NBA, the owners are going to make their money off ad revenue. They're going to pay these players to play, right? That's fine. But them being on TV, guess what? We don't care about the stands and the fans in the stands. You could even look at Shad Khan and the Jaguars. They don't care about the fans in the stands. It's the fact that we know we need the TV generate the revenue to keep this business going. So when we really look at it, okay, cool. If this is really about the revenue and the business, and y'all have a platform where you could really say something, you could either do one thing. You could boycott for real, and say, after season, deal with your own ad revenue money at another time. Black people are dying in these streets. Or we can continue to showboat and continue to do what we do and talk about voting. But guess what? Voting is just one aspect of the whole process. And I think the bigger conversation is specifically, even what I said in the talk, okay, cool, Brian, you have a charter school. What do you have about urban kids in Title I schools living in the urban core who need a quality education? What are your priorities there? Who's dealing with food insecurity? Who's dealing with healthcare? Who's dealing with all these other issues that eventually can come together and say, you know what, this is a holistic system. This is a holistic plan that addresses things, and we can boycott the NBA, MLB, whatever, because guess what? We're not going to change until you specifically pass this law. That is how you get it. How they're doing it is more, we're going to do it for the fanfare until another person dies. And the crazy part is, after another person dies, which hopefully doesn't happen before, you know, whatever, that's going to cause this frustration. Like, what are we really here for? Are we puppets, or are we actually protesters and pushing towards the movement?
And the president, as you point out, the presidential election, you know, it does take a lot of the oxygen out of some of the other important policy issues. And there's things that you just, you know, have knowledge of, and the nuances of how policy are put in place. People don't pay attention to state politics as much as national politics in some cases. What other issues beyond the presidential elections do you feel people should, you know, be concerned about or looking at as we approach the election?
I think in Florida specifically, I believe it's Amendment 3, which was open primaries. A lot of folks don't understand what that may mean. Right now, if you're registered to vote, you're either a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or maybe another party, Green Party, American Party, whatever. What happens is, like the election I just had August 18th with Congressman Lawson, that was a Democratic primary, meaning that from Gaston County, Tallahassee, almost all of I-10 to Jacksonville, if you're a registered Democrat in that district, you can vote. What open primaries would be, and it's on the November ballot, is basically says that if you're a Republican, if you're independent, if you're a third party, whatever, you can vote to cast whoever you want to be your Democratic nominee or your Republican nominee. Now, good and bad part about it is it really levels the playing field. But strategically, I'll say this. I sat down with Governor Ron DeSantis's campaign manager after the gubernatorial 2018 races. And we had a very personal conversation, and they shared the fact that Florida's becoming a lot more moderate, right? So how do you fight it being more moderate or more Democrats coming to the state, or keeping that control? Is you have to change the landscape of the electorate. Now, you're not going to say, okay, we're going to move more Republicans into the state. What we're going to say is, okay, this is a chess game. If this is what Democrats are doing, we realize what's happening here. Guess what? Let's open it up so independents, Republicans, and everybody can vote. We can pour more money into the elections, and we can kind of control it, because while one party has control, they're on their chessboard making moves. So this essentially ends up being the small little nugget that doesn't get talked about the entire election cycle till a week before the election. Everybody wants to know, hey, what's Amendment 3? What's this do? What's this do? That could probably have a bigger implication on the future of our country for the next, or our state at least, for the next 10 years, 20 years probably, rather than who's going to be president for the next 4. But nobody wants to talk about that because we're in the rah-rah politics of Donald Trump's timeline and whatever we end up seeing.
Really. Yeah, no, that's a great, people there. Yeah, there's 6 amendments on the ballot. People should really look at those, and that's a great one you gave some insight into. For years, you know, people have called for social justice and change. I mean, it's not like this is just a 2020 thing, but why haven't politicians made the necessary changes to address these issues?
I'll say, I'm in South Florida today, not too far from Marjorie Douglas, Stoneman Douglas High School, where I can't remember the gentleman's name who had the massacre here, but I want to say it's a timing, and I'm saying Marjorie Stoneman Douglas for a reason. When Parkland happened, it was the last 2 weeks of the legislative session in Tallahassee. When the kids from Parkland came to Tallahassee and they started marching on the Capitol, I remember me and some other lobbyists and whoever, we actually left the Capitol. It was too emotional. You know, like kids literally got killed, families up there. It's a lot going on, especially realizing that the time frame that the kids came up to Tallahassee, policy was done. There was not another committee meeting regarding policy unless the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate called it. The next thing was that the $50 million that they allocated to harden schools, that ended up coming from different projects that were already in the budget that could have been going to urban youth, rural counties, local governments, healthcare, hospitals, nursing, a little bit of everything, right? So all the funding was end up being pulled out of that and basically harden the schools. And what ends up happening, to get to the main point that kind of ties it all in, is that a lot of times when we're protesting, a lot of times when we want to change, the politicians aren't in the room to actually, or even in session to make it happen. Now, when session happened federally, you're looking at whether a Tuesday to Friday or Monday to Thursday. I believe they were on August recess. So, September, October, November, they'll be in until Thanksgiving. With Florida specifically, it's like the elections aren't until November. Organizational session isn't until after the election, a week after the election. And it's not till January when things actually get started for committee week. So we're in August, September right now. Who's going to plan for a January, February issue? Like nobody's going to keep beating this drum for the next 5-6 months, but when they actually want to be there to talk about things. So that ends up being the issue. Like, we talk about social change, but nobody can actually change anything. And by the time we actually can change things, people are going to be in a whole nother world. Because by the time 2021 gets here, we're going to be tired of 2020. Regardless of what happens the rest of this year, it's going to be, okay, we got to start fresh, new year, new me, Valentine's Day, whatever the year has planned is going to be better than 2020. And that's when the policy for social change is going to be put in place. But that's when nobody's going to be paying attention. And that's the biggest thing, is it happens while we're asleep. When it's a dead issue, it's like, you know what, I hear you, but keep that passion for 5 more months. Keep it for 5 more months. Let's build out a strategy. Let's make this thing happen. But it doesn't happen that way. It's like, you know what, almost like the NBA boycott. 48 hours later, I think we're good. Let's just keep moving.
Yeah. And we do have some audience questions, so I do want to jump in and make sure we hear from them too. One question, the first one that came in, a question is, policy and not protest does imply democracy is working. The gears of government are working. What can we do to ensure everyone truly has the right to vote and that government is working?
I think that it's more of the tactics. Like everybody should have a right to vote. I think that when you get in more the weeds of who should be in charge, that's when it really gets like more complicated. Yeah. Like, Republicans, conservatives, they want certain things. Liberals, Democrats, they want certain things. I think that when it comes down to it, it's like there's a fear tactic out there. Like even the felons restoration of rights. It's like, what people look at it like, okay, if we add 1.8 million felons and they actually vote, how could that change the landscape of the state? And you end up having these things where the party and the personal politics gets ahead of the people. And I think the only way we end that is continue to fight. Like, I mean, continue to not even fight like, hey, fist to cuffs, but fight strategically. Like, you know what, if that's what y'all gonna do, we have to have a counter. And I know, David, we were talking about spades earlier, but I know a lot of people play Madden football. And to me, I didn't get to say it in my talk, but I think it's kind of eye-opening. Anybody who plays Madden, they'll realize that one of the top run plays is a halfback dive, a run straight up the middle, right? Up to A gap, B gap, whatever, right? So if you continue to run a halfback dive all game, after a while, a good player is going to be like, listen, I know how to stop the run. I'm going to run this QB trap. I'm going to blitz. I'm going to hit the gaps, whatever. I'm going to stop it. And after a while, you're going to get to a point of, okay, I either have to pass or I'm going to keep running. The problem is we keep running. We keep running this halfback dive trying to get forward, but it's like, you know what? We got to hit a play action. We got to run deep. We got to hit a post route. We got to hit a slant. We got to mix it up some kind of way. And the biggest thing with social change, with race, with policies and everything, is the fact of we have to continue to change the strategy to get that first down, get that win, go for it on 4th and 1, whatever. We have to continue to make those little strides that we're making, because if we don't, we're going to continue to complain about issues that happen, voter suppression or whatever, but we don't want to strategically make that same effort, whether it's spades with the big joker or run a halfback dive in Madden. Right. It's the same thing. You have to have a strategy in order to win, point blank period. And the only way we get politics and politics working for the people is to have a strategy that puts it in place, not just the politicians in place, to be honest.
And next question that came in from our audience. We know how difficult this process is. You're able to meet with legislators, but a lot of people don't have, that experience that you do. What steps do you recommend for somebody just getting involved in understanding policy, just starting to think strategically about a key issue that's really their true passion? It's such a difficult process to just start to scratch the surface. Like, what would you recommend as those first 2 or 3 steps?
Honestly, the first step is always research. right? Because Google is an amazing tool, but I'll share a secret that not a lot of Googlers or nerds will tell people. If you put in all in text, colon, and in brackets put the keywords you're looking for, Google will actually curate everything you're searching for in that search. And if you want to just Google search tips, Google that, and they'll tell you some better ones as well. But I think the biggest thing is research, because before you even though we're passionate about our policies or things that really impact our quality of life, the number one thing is you have to understand where this policy came from. You know, you have to understand exactly why things are the way they are. It's kind of like if you're building a house, you're not going to build a house on marshland or by a lake, you know, because there's certain things with the soil. If you build on it, the house is going to sink. So there's certain things that you need to have a background of that you know about before you even kind of change or try to change policy. I think that's where you start. The other part, I think people always say, you know, well, it always ends up being twofold. How do you get a bill filed, or how do you build a relationship with an elected official? Me personally, I'll be honest, same thing in my TED Talk. I've been in customer service since I was 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I know how to talk to anybody. Like the same person who doesn't want their eggs and cereal in the same bag is the same person who needs their overdraft fees reversed on a Friday because they can't survive for the next 2 weeks. Like there's little that's between people. And I think understanding people is the most important thing, because you can have a super conservative who may be really passionate about a democratic issue, but it's the fact of how it's structured, how the background's there, what the research is there, and really the benefit of people. And I think that the other thing is sometimes you need to get out your own head, because a lot of times we'll take the personal things we're impacted by and try to stress that across everybody, when it's like, you know what, I hear you, there are 13 million people in the state of Florida, but only 1,000 people are impacted by this. Should we change the law for these 1,000 people? Yeah. You know, it's kind of a topsy-turvy piece where it's like, I get that, but I think the main thing where people get frustrated, the only law they really focus on right now is the police unions, right? And what happens there. And I think that that's a bigger fight that everybody's going to have to take on, because, and I'll be transparent with it, and you see it, the police union is almost no different from the teachers union, mm-hmm. or the hotel workers union, or the NBA players union. It's a union that represents the workers, right? So if we're talking about, and I don't know if this will work, I'm just pulling this out of thin air. If we're talking about the NBA players boycotting and getting paid, right? Or an NBA player running into the stands like Ron Artest and fighting a fan, right? Mm-hmm. Should he be paid? The union's going to make that decision, that they're going to fight for that player. And that's exactly what's happening with the police. Listen, I know they killed somebody. I know this happened, but guess what? As a union, we have to stick up for them. And I think that once you get into the literal weeds of, okay, what are unions allowed to do? Let's dismantle the police union. People may say that, just defund the police, dismantle police unions, right? Okay, there's going to be a domino effect for every other union in America, right? From SEIU to the rest of them. So when you really get back to it, it's like, you know what? How do we make a uniform union reform? I just pulled that out. I don't know if that really makes sense. But it's like that has to be a conversation that has to be had, because it's a domino effect on the rest of the things. But it's the fact of how do we break this barrier down that people really are focused on with this police union stuff, and actually have a common sense solution to it. Like, you know what? Let's look at all the other unions and what the kickback or fight may be, so we can create a constructive plan that not only addresses the police brutality and whatever the union power can get, but also protects other unions for whatever other aspect they may have. I know it's kind of far-fetched, but it's something to really think about sometimes. Yeah.
No, that's great. It just shows, how policy issues are interconnected, and you do have to do your research and study the interconnectivity there. Another question we just got in from an audience member. What are your thoughts about Black professional athletes supporting Black-owned banks to strengthen the Black dollar for Black businesses, Black borrowers? Just that coming in from an audience member.
I'm not opposed to that. I think that works, but culturally, that's not it. As a culture, we have to really look at the benefit and the reasons why we don't reinvest in our community, right? And it's not just the Black banks, right? I support the athletes doing it. I think there's longevity there. I do think that it's something that has happened before, because a lot of people will point to Tulsa, but they won't look at Rosewood, because even Rosewood before the massacre was its own little Tulsa that had its own banking system and its own Black economic wealth power structure that was being built, right? So people don't really focus on those pieces. But I think that the biggest piece is we have to look at reinvesting in our folks, but we need to change our mindset because, and I'll be transparent, David, I know this isn't a conversation that we signed up for. See, what happens is Black folks want a discount of the Black folks, right? So we discount the Black bank, we discount the Black business, we want to get it cheaper, we want to get all these other things. Like, I'm quite sure somebody will go to a Black bank and be like, listen, I know the interest rate is 2.98, but I need 2.5, I need 2.0, right? And if they don't give it to them, well, y'all ain't whatever, right? They're going to go to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or Bank of England to get a better rate or maybe pay more. And what happens is we have this stigma in our mind that because it's Black owned, Black whatever, we have to get it cheaper, better, whatever, right? That's the main problem. But the issue is, and I think we could look at every HBCU in the country and compare it to Morehouse, right? Morehouse is one of the only HBCUs that has all of its alumni annually contribute back to their endowment, right? No other HBCU really has a structure like that. Now, most of them are public institutions, unlike Cookman or Florida Memorial or the rest like that. But it's a fact of we have to change our mindset. Like, the athletes can do it, but the athletes aren't going to push the narrative forward. Case in point, a good friend of mine, Freddie Figures, he has his own wireless network. The only Black man in America that has his own telecoms industry, right? Like Verizon, like T-Mobile, and Sprint. But it's hard for people to switch over from AT&T and their iPhones to a Figures wireless phone because the stigma behind it. Now, Jeezy's behind him. A lot of other folks, or young Jeezy for people who may not know, are behind him, and other Black entrepreneurs. But it's a fact of, what are you going to do in the Black community to switch over from Sprint to AT&T to Figures wireless? People aren't going to probably do it. There'll be some, but there won't be enough to be sustainable. So it's more like, again, I think the deeper question of what we do culturally and how we think and how we operate, rather than just kind of shining the light on Black banks and Black athletes to maybe be the holy grail on what we do to save economic power in our community.
Yeah, that's a great point. But thank you for going so in depth there, because it's educational for me, as I'm sure it is for some of our audience. That we're going to close with this question. We're all living through 2020, trying to get through it, and news yesterday, this week, so much negative, people dying. But what keeps you going? Why are you hopeful as we progress now? I see you crisscrossing the state. Follow this guy on social media, by the way, Hip Hop Lobbyist. He's tremendous on every channel. But you work so hard and are tireless. Something has got to get you getting out of bed in the morning to keep you hopeful.
I'll see if I can show it. I think my phone died. Never mind, I can't show the picture. There's a picture I have on my phone of my great grandmother Irene, my grandmother, and my mom before my grandmother moved to America and sponsors citizenship for my family to live here. That's what drives me. Honestly, it's like, even I hear narrative about immigrants and what immigrants do for this country. Even watching Hamilton finally a few weeks ago, and just even hearing the narrative of what immigrants have done for this country, it really drives me. And it's not just to say, from my Jamaican lineage and background, that's all it is. It's just the fact that I realize that I'm here for a reason. Like easy, my grandmother could have stayed in Jamaica. I could have been born and raised in Jamaica and never even stepped foot in America ever. But even realizing where I'm here or where I'm at, the time frame I'm in, like, it's not 1920, it's 2020. And it's a whole other mindset of being a Black man in America today rather than 100 years ago. So it kind of puts it all in perspective, and that kind of drives me. And also realizing that nobody else has my skill set. Like, even me calling myself the Hip Hop Lobbyist, and even getting to a point where I have the relationships not only in the political sphere, but in the entertainment sphere as well. And it's kind of like, it's putting a lot of things in perspective of where life's journey takes me. And that's what kind of drives me. I understand that, like I was telling earlier, I was at a funeral earlier this morning. And I think just looking at life in general, you appreciate life, you have reverence for life, and you realize that even though literally I left the funeral and came here and life has to go on, it's a fact of, like, I have to do what I have to do with this little this little time I have here. And I think that my impact, that what I'm doing day to day in God's story through my life, has kind of brought me to where I'm at right now. And that drives me day to day. Just like that's all I need. It's not the money, even though money's good. It's not the fame. I don't really care what people think about me. It's a fact of end of the day, the access and the ability to actually change things for people that I've met before or never will meet in life. And that's what drives me. I literally, sorry for rambling here, I was driving by the school that my first client, Wayman Academy of the Arts and Wayman Community Development Corporation, and I saw a few weeks ago the kids outside playing. for the summer camp. And even though we weren't able to get the funding this year, it's like, you know what, I drove away off campus, met with my client and drove off. I said, you know what, that's what I'm working for. I'm working for these kids I'll never meet. And maybe 50 years from now, when I'm in Tallahassee and I hear about a kid who's a next young lobbyist and he went to Wayman Academy and he went to the summer programs, and then I could probably see that the benefit of whatever I did in life would be happy. You know, I'll be blessed from that. And that's what drives me. It's like, I know that what I'm doing has a bigger path or a bigger impact. It's just a fact of I can't get caught up in the BS of day-to-day life or even 2020 at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, the impact of your talk is incredible and the impact of your work is incredible. And we're really grateful to have you on today, Phillip, to just share what you're working on now. And, you know, we can share that talk again. Please, people, go back and watch that talk and look up Phillip's books and just see what he's working on. This was our third installment in Small Great Conversations on Racism. Our next one is September 12th with Dr. Jeffrey Hayes. Tickets will be open for that one soon. Her TEDxJacksonville talk was Arts, Activism, and Simple Steps. And we look forward to that conversation as well. But I really appreciate you joining us, Phillip. Thank you.
Hey, David, thank you for having me. Sabine, the entire leadership team at TEDxJacksonville. I love you guys. I appreciate the time.